Right, I want to introduce Garrett Salpeter today. He's one of CC4C's champion teammates and founder and chief neurological officer of Neufit. It's also known as the health engineer. Garrett's taken his education in physics and engineering and applied it into a system for making the human body better. In 2009, he opened Neufit, which combines an advanced understanding of physiology with the best practices for diverse training and therapeutic practices, and that constantly push this process by using technology to accelerate them further, allowing people to live life at a higher level. So it's a brain-body connection, and I will let Garrett start his presentation. And thank you for teaching us for the next hour, Garrett.
Fabulous. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I, as you know, believe very strongly in what CC4C is doing, and it's a true honor to be here presenting. So thank you.
Sure.
And I'll pull up my presentation here.
Garrett, I'm so sorry to disturb you. Do you want to close your blind behind you so we can see your face just a little bit better?
Sure.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's such a nice day, though.
I know.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is the screen there? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So this is Neufit. We use neurological stimulation for faster healing and high performance. And I am grateful to be here presenting this work to you today. So I'll give you a little background first on the history and how we got to be here and how Neufit evolved over the last several years. So my story first starts with the game of ice hockey, which I played. There's photographic evidence here. As embarrassed as I am about that photo, I thought it would be worth sharing. So I loved the game of ice hockey and wasn't a very good athlete. And so I was in this situation where I really had to learn a lot about strength and conditioning and athletic performance. And I dove in very deeply into the world of strength and conditioning to try to turn myself into an athlete. And I was always very disappointed when the traditional stuff that was supposed to work did not work for me. And then, along the way, I also had several injuries and had similar experiences of being disappointed and frustrated with what I was told by the traditional doctors and physical therapists. And I was essentially given the message that I'm going to have to rely on these drugs and these surgeries and these injections and ice and rest. And I always just had in the back of my mind this sense that, there had to be a better way. There was more to me as a person, more ability to heal, to recover, to change and adapt inside of me, as there is in every human. And it just, didn't sit right with me. And in parallel, to all this, I was a pretty good student. I ended up being a physics major in college. I was a practice squad player on the hockey team, which was an accomplishment for me. But never went too far with it. And then my last year in college, I had some torn ligaments in my wrist, and I had a really, really amazing experience where someone introduced me to an older version of the technology that we now use. And by using that, just tinkering around with it, instead of being out for 3 months and having surgery, I ended up healing ligaments on their own in the span of about 2.5 weeks. I was just blown away. It was the first time when the light bulb really went off for me that there was a better way. And so I was still set to come down to engineering school here at UT in Austin, and came down here. But my first summer, then I went and apprenticed with a functional neurologist, so a doctor who was doing work that was all about how patterns of activity, neurological activity in the body, create changes of activity in the brain. And so when I went and studied with him, I learned that one, there truly was a better way. That I learned that the nervous system, working with the nervous system, was a path to make profound changes in the body, and often to do so very, very quickly. And I also learned that, oh gosh, there actually was a way for me to take this work that I was super passionate about and actually do something with it. And so I ended up opening a facility here in just 250 square feet in the back of a chiropractor's office. And that was 10 years ago now. And so a lot of this, what we're doing now, started then and has evolved as I've learned and experimented and mentored under other very impactful people, and used what I've learned along the way and combined it with our technology, and then eventually, made our own technology with some upgrades, and I can get into that. So for the last year, we have finally in practice been using the Newbie, which is the technological culmination of all of this work. And the Newbie, it's a type of electrical stimulation, but it's a lot different than the electrical stimulation that people normally think of. Virtually everyone has experience with, whether it be a TENS unit or using interferential or other electrical stimulation at a chiropractor's office or a physical therapist's office. And so the Newbie is different in a lot of ways. There's a picture of it there at the top right. And then these are some of the ways that the technology is different. One is that virtually everything else out there is alternating current, whereas the Newbie is a uniquely shaped pulse direct current. And so this picture here at the bottom right, you can see that the top picture A is an alternating current. The signal goes back and forth. And that is what most devices are. That's been the norm for a while, not because of any particular benefit in the body, but because those are the easiest and least expensive devices to engineer. And because even though it had been known for a while that direct current had benefits, it was actually difficult to get it into the body because of skin burns. It would always burn the skin. And the Soviets did some of that work because they could burn their athletes, and it was for Mother Russia and everything, they could get away with it. But we can't necessarily do that here in this country. And so getting direct current into the body has been known for a while to have a lot of beneficial effects on tissue healing. And then the next effect is this difference between eccentric and concentric contractions. And so a little bit of backstory. Concentric just means shortening. Eccentric means lengthening. So muscles have two signals. They can either contract or relax. And they can contract to create tension as they're shortening. So think if you're doing a bicep curl and lifting the weight up, is the bicep concentrically working, and then lowering it, the bicep is eccentrically elongating. And that eccentric movement is so important because most injuries, like 99% of them, happen during the deceleration phase of movement. That's not when we're starting, but when we're stopping, when we're slowing down, when we're having to stop going one direction to shift and move in another, or when we're landing from a jump. In the athletic world, that's the kind of thing that where most injuries happen. And this is very important for preventing injury, very important for overall function. The more force that muscles can absorb, the better shock absorbers they are, the more effectively they protect the body. So we'll go into an example of this type of biomechanical approach or this neurological approach, how it can affect a biomechanical injury like a muscle tear. So here you can see the example. This is Ivan, a gentleman who is a bodybuilder and very strong. And this is an example of our work with him. So he had a torn pec muscle. You can see in that first picture how black and blue and nasty it is. And that's usually, just for context, usually 10 to 12 weeks to recover from that injury. And so if you see the caption at the bottom of the second picture, you see 2 weeks later, he actually ends up being fully healed. And, I guess it spoiled the story there a little bit. But this is a very cool example because of how dramatically we were able to reduce the healing time, and an example of this eccentric versus concentric distinction. Because most electrical stimulation is going to be causing muscles to shorten. Ours allows those muscles to lengthen. And this is particularly important in this case because around that torn muscle tissue, all the muscles are really bracing and shortening, they're already in that concentrically contracted state. They're basically, saying, oh my gosh, we could get attacked or hit again at any moment. And so everything around that torn site is holding on, bracing, shortening, protecting. That is productive if he literally gets attacked in that pec again, but it's very counterproductive for almost everything else, including movement, including healing. And so what we were able to do with the signal from the newbie is send the signal to those muscles to lengthen out, eccentrically elongate. And by doing that, we literally clear more space for blood, raw materials, the proteins, all the nutrients that are needed to regrow that tissue, clear the space for that to go in. Because when everything's protecting and shortening, there's pressure that's blocking the flow of blood and nutrients. And when we can open up those pathways, the blood can flow in, proteins can come in, he can get the debris and the waste products out, and the same bodily healing processes are taking place. They're just able to take place at the rate that they should if the impediments can just be gotten out of the way. And so that's all we're doing there, is getting out of the way whatever influences would be limiting or slowing down the body's natural healing process. Another difference in how the newbie works compared to traditional devices is in this paradigm. Most of the time, electrical stimulation devices are sending a signal to basically hijack muscles, a motor signal, the output side of the nervous system, to contract muscles, whereas we are preferentially sending more of a sensory signal, which is the opposite direction, the sensory signal. So it's, if I'm moving my arm, for instance, just to help understand this, even if my eyes are closed, I know that my arm is moving because of those signals that are coming back from my arm to my brain. And we can actually duplicate those same signals with the newbie. So if I had a pad here on my arm, my brain would think that my arm is moving even if it's not, because we're sending those same signals. And that becomes important because it allows us to work within an entirely different paradigm. So normally, exercise and rehabilitation and any of the work in this arena, normally this work is all based on output. It's based on trying to build up tissues, trying to build new muscle, trying to build new things in the body. In contrast, our work is about tapping in to abilities that are already present within the body. And it starts with a belief that all humans are miracles. So I believe, as I'm sure everyone on this call does as well, that humans are miraculous, that we have inside of us the power to heal from injury. We have the power to adapt to any environment. We have this incredible ability and untapped potential. And if we can tap into even part of it, we can start to see some pretty incredible things happen with, in many ways, in many areas of life and health and performance. So I have this one saying here: you already have all of the strength, speed, endurance, and flexibility that you'll ever need. We're teaching you how to display it. So I have that quote there because, to me, that summarizes a lot of what we're trying to do with people in terms of human performance. We're not necessarily trying to build any of these traits. We're trying to tap in to those traits that are already present within the person. They're just lying dormant. And the reason that people can't usually tap in to those abilities, and the reason that we have different limitations, are that our brains actually limit or govern us and prevent us from expressing those things. The brain's number one priority is survival. The brain is always looking at everything in our environment, everything inside of us, internal environment, everything around us, and filtering it through different pathways depending on the answer to the question, is it safe? So the brain is always looking at every single thing, that's processing millions of bits of information every second to make sure that nothing poses an immediate survival threat. And if something does pose an immediate survival threat, like, for example, if I'm in this room here and a tiger walks through the door, and it looks hungry, my brain is going to stop paying attention to this computer. It's going to forget almost everything else about where we are and the rest of the environment. And it's going to focus on that tiger because that is an immediate survival threat. So the brain is working through this paradigm. You can see in this picture here, we have hardwired reflexes that are built around protection. These are fans in a stadium, a baseball game, and one of the players swung and the bat broke. And so that's part of the bat flying. You can see as the bat's flying towards this group of people, all of their arms are up in actually the exact same angle almost. You can see there's this stereotypical pattern of this protective reflex wherein the body brings the hard, bony parts in front of the softer, squishier, more vulnerable parts to protect. And so this is one protective mechanism that's hardwired into the body. And there's several others. The brain is always trying to conserve energy in case there's a famine tomorrow. The brain doesn't know that we live in a world of plenty and that most of us, thankfully, don't have to worry about where our next meal is coming from. So the brain is always trying to conserve energy, and it will, in most people, in most cases, will start to downregulate the metabolic rate and downregulate what it's doing if it doesn't have enough energy and if it doesn't think that it needs to carry on those particular activities. So building muscle is very interesting to consider from a survival perspective because it actually, we need some muscle to be able to run away from an attacker or to be able to fight for our lives. So some muscle is important for survival, but too much can be very, very threatening because it takes a lot of energy to maintain that. And if there's a famine tomorrow, it's going to be much more expensive to maintain that bodily tissue. And so only if the brain understands that the body is eating an immense amount of calories will it actually build muscle. And so that's why bodybuilders have to eat, every 2 or 3 hours they eat a meal. And that's what it takes to convince the brain that it's actually okay, that calories are so plentiful that it will be safe to carry around all that extra muscle mass. And then there's other in the list here, other considerations in terms of cortisol hormones and fat, and how cortisol being a stress hormone, how that actually causes the body to store fat for later, to recover, to have energy later on when the stressful period is over. Calluses are a protective mechanism because the body will lay down tissue wherever the skin got worn away. The body will lay down tissue there so that it doesn't have to, in the future, work as hard to repair that skin. So it's about saving energy for later. Building some muscle is actually that same type of adaptation, because if the body meets a challenge that was taxing, if the brain thinks, well, if I lay down more muscle, it might be easier next time and it will be less energetically expensive. So there's this cost-benefit analysis equation always going on. In terms of this paradigm and all of these physical abilities already being inside of us, there's a continuum that describes this all in what I consider to be a very effective way. So there's the protection performance continuum, and our brains are going to move us somewhere along this spectrum depending on many, many factors. Overall, those factors, whether it be the environment, how we slept, whether we are sick or not, how much food we've eaten, how we're feeling psychologically, have we had a conflict with one of our loved ones today, or are things relatively happy on the home front, so to speak, or how's our relationship with our boss or coworkers. All of these things are going to cause the brain to think that there's some certain level of threat, and the less threat there is, the more we're going to be able to move toward the performance side of the spectrum. The more threat there is, the more the brain wants to protect, the more we're going to see these things. We're going to be standing still rather than moving fast or jumping high. We're going to be putting on the brakes, and that means many things. It can mean physically shutting down the metabolic rate. It can mean just stopping performance. It can mean triggering a pain signal that actually causes us to change our behavior and not use certain areas of the body. It can mean a freeze response, as in like, feeling like you just can't get off the couch or can't get up out of bed in the morning, just like totally like you have the flu or something. It can lead to tension and weakness, which is a deficit in performance. And by tension, I mean, less range of motion. So the body, if the body doesn't feel that it's safe to move through greater ranges of motion, it's going to stop you and restrict you. And so tension really is a protective mechanism. Fatigue is also a protective mechanism as well. If the brain doesn't believe there's enough energy to complete some sort of task, it's going to cause you to feel fatigue in order to prevent you from pushing further beyond whatever it perceives to be the safety threshold. And usually, those governors are set too conservatively, and that's where it takes mental toughness to kind of push through those sorts of barriers. So on the performance side, on the other side of the spectrum, there's, for an athlete, being fast and strong, for all of us, being supple, having more range of motion, being adaptable to our environment, and also healing. It takes a lot of underlying physical process and energy in order to heal from trauma, to help the body recover from whatever happens to it. And so being on this side of the spectrum is very important for healing from an injury, for recovering from whether it be some sort of rare or undiagnosed or exotic disease, or a knee surgery or herniated discs in the back, whatever it is, these same rules still apply. So the next part of what makes the newbie unique is this effect on function. And so we've touched on some of this already, but because the alternating current devices promote contraction, they actually end up causing muscles to fight against each other, and they train the body to move as if you were driving a car, hitting the throttle and the brake pedal at the same time. And of course, that's a very inefficient way to drive, because a lot of the gas that you're burning, or a lot of the energy from the engine that should be going to forward propulsion of the car, is just going to fight against the brakes. There's this internal tension in which energy is wasted and things are very inefficient in the body. That actually is the same type of pattern that also leads to injury. Because if muscles can't lengthen to absorb force, cushion the landing phases of movement, instead of the muscles absorbing force, all that force goes into the joints, and you have these sorts of sprains, strains, tears, chronic tendinitis, the things that develop either from one intense movement or from little chronic bits that build up over time. And so most electrical devices in this category end up causing or reinforcing the same bad movement patterns that lead to the same sorts of problems in the first place. So, although there can be a little bit of value with traditional devices in terms of mechanically pumping blood and lymph and other fluids, overall, there's definitely some downsides as well. In contrast, the newbie, because we have all these things we talked about so forth, eccentric elongation of muscles, this sensory paradigm that allows us to find where some of those governors are, where it allows us to promote effective coordination between opposing muscles. And I'll give you a couple examples here. So these are two of many cases where we've been able to see people make incredible changes in just one session, the first visit here. So because the newbie sends preferentially a sensory signal, and because it promotes the coordination here, we can do some things that you couldn't do with traditional devices. For instance, we can do this scanning and diagnostic process that we do with most people when we start the process. And we scan around on the body. Based on how that person responds, we can tell exactly where the deficiencies are in their body, in their nervous system. And by working at that level, we typically are able to reprogram for more efficient movement, better eccentric elongation of muscles, more proper neuromuscular activation. And so we see things like these two examples here, where with this gentleman on the left, we found a couple spots. We found a couple spots in his hip. We found a couple spots in the torso, some of the core muscles, that by getting them working, he was able to move through this greater range, not because we spent hours stretching and built more length in the muscle. Instead, we simply turned on the muscles that were not working before, and that allowed the ones that were really tight and holding him and protecting him, because the first ones that weren't working started working again. Those ones that were holding him excessively tight could let go. They could just thankfully relax and start to do their own job, rather than do their own job plus have to cover for these other ones. And so he got more flexible, not by stretching, but by simply tapping into his nervous system, changing some of the patterns that had gone bad, and then starting to move more optimally. And all of a sudden, the range of motion just showed up. It was there all along. We just had to figure out how to tap into it. Similarly here with this woman on the right, she had chronic knee pain for years, and her pain-free range of motion in the squat was what you see in that first picture. So maybe 30 to 45 degrees above parallel with the thighs, and then all of a sudden, after the first session, she's able to get down to parallel. So a huge difference in pain-free range of motion, and the same sort of thing happened because her body would not let her go that deep into a squat, and it caused pain because it sensed that it wasn't safe for her to go there because of a combination of weakness and poor coordination that was causing her to put the force in the wrong areas of her knee. And once we got the proper muscles turned back on, all of a sudden her brain realized, oh, hey, it's not as threatening to go down into that deeper squat. And it let her do that, not by doing months of mobility work, but just by changing the pattern and tapping into the range of motion that was already there, present, just lying dormant. Another great example of the coordination that we've been talking about is our own friend from CC4C. So Belle, we met Belle through CC4C and have been working with her for a few months now, since the end of last year, and have had a fabulous time with her. It's been just, really positive. Everyone loves seeing Belle when she comes in. She's just got a tremendous spirit, and we have been working with her. It's been, slow going at times, but overall we've definitely made some progress. She has, as many of you on the call probably know, she has a NPC, a rare genetic disorder that affects every system in the body because it's a cellular issue. It also, included in that, certainly affects the nervous system. And so she's had issues with walking and body control and strength. And through some of the work we've been doing to help her optimize or at least improve neurological function, so far she's seen about a 20% increase in her walking ability. She's seen some improvements in balance, some improvements in strength, and it's a story that is continuing on. So hopefully as things progress, we'll have even more details and more improvements to share. One of the more exciting stories that has come out of our office and our work here recently is that of Amy. So Amy is another incredible woman. 25 years ago, she fell off a horse and broke her neck. So she broke her neck and ended up being paralyzed from the waist down. You can see her sitting here in her wheelchair. And although she had been paralyzed for that period of time, she still lived a great life. She has children, she works, she would go hogging, which is hand jogging. So she would go 2 or 3 miles at a time in her wheelchair, propelling herself with her hands, just to give you an idea of the fact that she wasn't just rolling over and taking what life gave her. She was making the most of it. So she had done a little bit of physical therapy, or a lot of physical therapy and rehabilitation in the first 2 years or so after her accident, and of course, didn't make any progress in terms of regaining the use of her legs. And then, for 25 years, she was paralyzed from the waist down. She hadn't moved her legs or feet. And she was recommended to come in and see us by a friend who said, hey, they do some stuff with the nervous system. You got something neurologically going on. Why don't you just go in and see what they have to say? And so we started working with Amy. we did our scanning process with the newbie. We actually found a couple of spots where, even though she couldn't move, where she could feel the current. And so it seemed like we had maybe a little bit of a, if we're trying to walk through a door, it's like maybe there was a little crack, we could see a little bit of light through there. And so we started working on some of those spots. And in the first few months, she started getting more sensation in her legs. She could tell hot and cold when she was bathing. And eventually she started being able to sweat, which was very exciting to get some of that autonomic function back in her legs, where she couldn't sweat before, even on the hottest day. Started being able to do that. And then eventually we started to see a little bit of twitching coming back in the foot, a little bit of the ability to raise her leg a little bit. And, we started getting pretty excited. So fast forward now, we've been working with Amy for about 2 years, and she's actually walking on a walker here. So you can see that picture on the right. That is the hallway in our building. She initially was doing some squats with hand support, and then she started doing some walking just a few feet back and forth across our space. And now she's walking, 500 plus feet at a time. So we actually had to transition out into the hallway of our building. So you see Amy there in the walker, and she's working in this picture with Austin, who is one of my colleagues here at Neufit, and he has the newbie device on the cart there, and then the cables are on Amy, helping her get the appropriate neurological signals and try to get as much appropriate function as possible in her muscles while she's walking. So that has been just, a very inspirational story, and one that I'm so proud and honored to be working with her. And, it's really, really a fabulous experience overall. So many, many thanks to Amy for the spirit and enthusiasm that she brings, and diligence and consistency and persistence. And on that note, I would like to close just by saying thank you. It is a tremendous honor to be a part of CC4C, and I'm thankful to everyone on the call, everyone in the organization, and really appreciate the opportunity to hop on and share our work here today. And I know a lot of people will be watching the recording. If anyone has questions live, I'm happy to answer those. Or if you'd like to, ask us any questions, you can reach us on our website, which is www.neu.fit, neu.fit. Should have pulled that up here. I'll show you, neu.fit, just like that. And then on we do a lot of posting on Instagram and Facebook. So Instagram is Neufit. Just look us up like that. You'll see the logo, and so those are good places to keep in touch with us. And I will, on that, stop sharing the screen here. And
Garrett, that was fascinating. Thank you for
you.
sharing that information, and I found all that very interesting. And my kids have been to see Garrett in Austin for a couple different injuries they've had, and it's been super helpful to help them heal quicker, and get right back into their sport. So I highly recommend it, and especially for any of our kids that have issues with walking, then I think that's going to be super helpful. Like Belle's going to see him. It's been really helpful for her. So if anyone has questions, please ask Garrett now.
And then the other thing, what you mentioned, Kim, we have, gotten to work with your son for ankle and knee soccer stuff. And this, the cool thing about it is that because we're working with the nervous system, and the nervous system controls everything. So it's, relevant for sports injuries, also relevant trying to help someone move better when they have, something as challenging as NPC. So not that we've,
Right.
To imply that we've fully cracked the code there by any means, but it's just, because it's neurologically based, the width and breadth of people that we've been able to help is just, it's different than, more what people are able to do traditionally in this sort of space.
Exactly. Anybody have any questions?
Did you give an age of the patients you see? Like, at what age can you begin Neufit? And then what is, the age of your oldest patient?
Sure. Hi, Jenny, by the way. Hello.
Hi there. I love listening to all of this. We're also a Neufit family. So all the Raymonds.
Yes. So in the office here, we've worked with children as young as age 7. I've also used the device at home with my daughter. My older daughter, actually, she had some arm soreness after gymnastics. And so our first kind of real work we did was probably when she was about 5. I've had it on just for fun, because my 2-year-old daughter wanted to do what her big sister was doing. So I've had it on her, but not for really anything real, just kind of for fun. But so, 5, 6, 7, we could start with as young as that. And then I've worked with, so far, the oldest is 95. Actually had a 95-year-old gentleman who hurt his knee and was told the only way he was going to get out of pain was a knee replacement. And of course, that can be very challenging and can be too much for someone at that age, depending on the state that they're in. And so we worked together, and in 3 sessions, he was dancing a little jig here in the office. It was really cool. So he was able to get out of pain and thankfully avoid that surgery, because getting surgery in one's mid-90s at this point, oftentimes can be kind of a beginning of the end.
Right. Anybody else?
If anyone has any other questions, there's a contact page on the website where you can email. Just at the bottom, there's a place to email in, or our phone number's on there. Please give us a call. I'd be definitely happy to talk with anyone in the CC4C tribe, and hopefully we can help you out.
Garrett, can you give your website address? I know it's a little different than most.
Yeah, it is. It's www.new.fit. So it's NEU.FIT. No.com, just new.fit.
And Garrett's his therapy is something that CC4C will cover. So if you have a child that you think will benefit from his services, then just submit your reimbursement to us, and we can take care of it. And Garrett, is there like 3 takeaways? Typically on these, we give people three takeaways from your presentation that they can, like, in your case, it might be a little bit harder, but kind of go do at home that's helpful to them. Maybe connecting the nervous system or something.
Yeah, so I'd say one is the belief in a better way, to realize that there often are solutions by tapping, better solutions that are present if we can tap into the real healing potential that is within the body, and just to be respectful and mindful of that. And so, for many people, much of the time, there are better answers than, medications and surgeries. Unfortunately, there are times when surgeries are necessary, when medications are necessary, and a lot of the children in CC4C, are, given the challenging situations they're in, are some of those cases. But even still, if the body is given the right inputs and put in the right environment, a lot of times it can do things that are miraculous, and that other people might not have thought were possible. So I'd say one is having that sort of kind of respect and appreciation for what the body can do when it's put in the right environment and given the right inputs. Another takeaway would be the concept we talked about of the protect versus perform continuum, and kind of piggybacks onto the first thing I said there about the potential of the body. But the more we can do to reduce the brain's perception of threat, the more we can tap into that underlying ability. And so basic things like the way that we breathe even, can be a profound thing, because just a few minutes of nose breathing rather than mouth breathing can reduce the stress response and cause the body to go more into a parasympathetic state, tap into the side of the continuum that we want to be on. So the way that we breathe, is super important, because that's one of the quickest ways to tap into the body's healing potential. And then the third thing I would say, as a takeaway, obviously we use our technology to help promote higher level neurological activity. Some of what we do, well, it's the combination of technology and advanced methodology. And so some of what we do is definitely in the methodology, and some of it can be done, at home through different strategic exercise programs and things like that. So if anyone's interested in trying to tap into some of this, I can share a little follow along home video and movement sequence that I created, and we can link to that. And that is, more for a general audience, so not necessarily for, unfortunately for someone like Belle, who is dealing with all the ramifications of NPC, but in general, it can help people tap into some of these things that we talked about, and this profound power that I know we all have. So
and how do you get that? How would we get that from you?
I'll share that with you. Can I share that with you? And then wherever this is posted, we can put the link right underneath.
Yes, that's perfect.
It's like a YouTube link.
Okay, tell me a little bit about with the mouth breathing. Like, I'm a mouth breather at night. How does that affect the nervous system?
That's a great question. And so I guess I'll fast forward to the solution, one potential solution. So sometimes people actually tape their mouth shut at night so that they're forced to breathe through their nose. Of course, if you're like, suffocating yourself or something like that, then don't do it. It may not be for you, but that is something that literally, has been done in different times with different people. I've done it myself for sure. And there's so many mechanisms that are activated when we breathe through the nose. Of course, the nose filters and warms air, so it prevents us from getting upper respiratory infections, right? It blocks 99% of pathogens that would otherwise go into the lungs. The nose it actually has little ridges in it that create a turbine effect that drive air further down into the lungs, where there's better exchange of oxygen and CO2. And so, many things. And when we breathe in through the nose, all of this can work like it's designed. When we breathe in through the mouth, wherever we are in this sympathetic parasympathetic spectrum, wherever we are, a single breath through the mouth is going to cause the body to shift more sympathetic. It's going to be, even if just a little bit, it's going to be a little bit of movement towards that side of threat and stress and fight or flight response. And so the more we can breathe in through our nose and keep the body in a regulated state, the more bandwidth we have to deal with other challenges, whether it be illness or injury or just, stressors of daily life. We'll have more bandwidth to be able to handle those other challenges.
Okay. How long did it take you to learn how to breathe through your nose at night?
Let's see. When I was taping my mouth, I think I did it for about 2 months, and then I haven't done it since then, because I don't think I've had any issues, and my body got the point.
So did you train yourself to breathe through your nose, or since you are not doing the tape anymore, have you gone back to breathing?
I've trained myself to breathe through my nose. It's something that is just, you could probably say is like an obsession for me, is all this content that I went over today and everything we do here at Neufit. It's not just my, work from 9 to 5, but it's really my life. And so, I'm many times throughout the day, I have little triggers and anchors for myself to where I check in on how I'm breathing, remind myself to breathe through my nose, take a breath here and there to just reset if I'm, kind of getting just caught up in a hectic day or something like that. So definitely remind myself, and by doing that over now many years, it's become a habit where by default, before I would have breathed through my mouth. I still catch myself doing it from time to time, but there's many times I check in with myself and I notice that I am naturally breathing through my nose. And so it's a habit that has definitely caught on for the most part.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for this fabulous presentation and
Yeah.
all the information. And hopefully some of our other kids will start coming to see you too.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you. And really am tremendously grateful to be here and know you and everyone else on the CC4C team.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a champion teammate. Okay, so to get out of the webinar, you'll see a little